can hear you very clearly. Actually, you're the first to have your own mic, so thanks for that.
Hey, no
You know,
problem.
most of the time it's
For my old podcasting days, I even got these earphones you can't see.
oh man, that's awesome. Yeah, the frustrating part, and this happened on the last one, is what's cool about the software is I can go in and normally I have like my notes all above your head, and when I go out and I go in, they all just disappear. And I just remembered that right now. So that's a hell of a start uh, to this podcast. But no, thanks for coming on. I mean, obviously going to be focused around innovation. And really just wanted to, first of all, shout out our boys on the Marquette basketball team who are making basketball look easy right now.
Yeah, it's weird to be thinking about that. Everyone thinks the expectation now is that if we're not ranked in the top 10, there's something wrong. I mean, Jake, we've come a long way in the last. Wow. I mean, I don't even think the 2003 team was ever ranked during the season in the top 5. I mean, I know we made a run, but we were a 3 seed, so probably weren't even in the top 10.
Yeah, and it's just a normal thing. It was really evident for me too, just like watching clips of practice and watching Shaka speak, just how it's so genuine. And it's not everything he says. He actually, not that previous coaches did it, but it's just you can see it in the team where it's so consistent. The energy at these games is so consistent.
He says someone said who's been around since the Cree days said that they've never seen anyone take culture to this level, and it is in everything he does. Culture is not just what he does every day and in the behaviors he rewards and the message he sends, but culture's in how he recruits. Like, he won't recruit a kid he doesn't think fits the culture, just won't do it. And so, that whole building relationships thing, it works, but he's also doing something really smart there, which is he's essentially, figuring out, hey, do I have is this kid going to be willing to buy into what we're doing? And, we see it even on the NIL side where, the whole NIL program was built around his culture idea, which is reward those who've worn the jersey. It's not like a lot of other schools that, they really focused on, how do you get people to show up? His point is they better show up for a different reason. And then if they get rewarded within the NIL rules, great. But yeah, it's been really fun.
Yeah, no, it's fun to see. It's obviously how we, got connected several years back through Marquette, which I'll touch on after you kind of give a brief, summary of your background and obviously your history with Cree. Is going to be the majority of what we're talking about. Just I did not want to go on for 2 minutes because people aren't here to listen to me. They're here to listen to the people that we bring on. So I guess if you could just give a little history of kind of your background.
Yeah, so Jake, I'm a Marquette alum. I graduated back in 1989, which is a lot longer ago than it sounds like. At least I don't feel that old. But in any case, electrical engineer, went to work for Hewlett-Packard, which was probably the coolest company you could go work for back in the late 80s, kind of like going to work for Tesla today. And after a few years, I met these guys at this little startup in North Carolina. And after a number of visits, they finally convinced me to move to North Carolina and join a 30-person company called Cree because they were going to invent the blue LED. Definitely didn't know exactly what I was getting into. It's probably why I said yes. And then honestly, the first time they asked me, I said no. I mean, that's actually an important part of my story, which is the first time I was asked if I was going to take the job, I chickened out, basically. I was afraid of what could go wrong. And so when I finally did make it there, it was an incredible journey. So from those 30 people and about $6 million in revenue that first year to my last year, I think we got a little over 1.6 billion and probably peaked at about 7,000 employees. And along the way, I pretty much had every job up until 2001, when at the wise old age of 34, I was promoted to the CEO of a public company. Probably was a good thing there were no other viable candidates because the board certainly wasn't thinking I was their guy, but the founder was done. He was burned out. And so I took that job, and we went on a heck of a journey from turning blue LEDs into white LEDs, into lighting, and getting involved in the LED bulb and that whole market, and then actually building a whole nother business that is still going today. It's called Wolfspeed. And today there's pretty much no electric vehicle out there that doesn't use the chips that we were inventing back in the early 90s. Now, I'd like to tell that story because in probably the 2012, 13, 14, that business was really struggling. It wasn't making its goals. And so we were on a 30-year startup venture. This is on the chips that go into electric vehicles. And so at one point we got frustrated and the investors didn't like it. So we were going to sell it and spin it off. And we started that process. Someone offered to buy it. We tried to sell it, had actually a deal for $800 million for a business that at the time was valued at zero. And the government wouldn't let us. They decided the technology could be too important. So all of a sudden, after a year of saying we're going to sell it, doing all the employee transitions, at the last minute, it gets pulled out. So we end up having to keep the business. And what's interesting is that business today is probably worth as much or more than the whole company was back then. But again, people would say, well, so why'd you try to sell it? Well, it wasn't worth anything at the time. And so I think, one of the messages that became clear to me is that innovation and doing things that are disruptive, they take way longer than anybody thinks. And, one of the biggest problems we all have is that it's easy to give up when the going gets tough and, go to our backup plan. And good thing that most of the time at Cree, we didn't have a backup plan. So that's kind of my story. So I retired in 2017 due to a health issue. My heart decided it didn't like me being a CEO after 16 years. So I had to take a break and then went on this new kind of second chapter. So I wrote a book, really trying to describe what it was about Cree that drove the innovation ideas that made us successful, and came up with the concept that it really wasn't a process and it wasn't the technology, but it was really recruiting and developing people that thought differently. It was a mindset. And so spent a lot of the time in the last few years talking to people about that. I've been able to join a couple other boards. I'm currently on the board of Ryder Systems, which you probably know is a big trucking logistics company. We also, I think, between one of the largest warehouse owners in the country, because we do a ton of work supporting people in outsourced logistics. And then in addition to that, I'm on the board of a couple small private companies, one that I needed a CEO. So a couple of years ago, I went back and did that for almost 2 years. I went back to a 10-person company and doing drug development. And we got it far enough along that I was able to convince someone eminently more qualified than me when it comes to drug development to be the CEO. And we're hoping that sometime before the summer that we will be approved to start testing that in humans for the first time. So that's another exciting journey that I got going on. So I stay busy, but nothing full time where I can't set my schedule.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Going back to the book, and I'll bring up a bunch of things from the book and things that you've said. Obviously the first thing that kind of caught my eye reading the book, and when you're talking about the hiring process at Cree, is that you would go play basketball. Getting back onto the basketball, it's not a basketball podcast, but just being willing to do things differently, right? Not a traditional interview where you're bored out of your mind. I mean, talk through that where you get to actually see. I mean, I think golf is similar, right? You get to see how people respond to different situations. But I think that threw you off, right, to start when you were going to go play basketball.
Yeah. So my first interview, they said, bring your basketball shoes. And I'm like, what? I said, yeah, we're going to play ball at lunch because you're coming. And so it wasn't, to be honest, the background at the time is that they weren't actually using it as a recruiting technique. They played ball on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. They had rented this local gym, and it didn't matter what was happening. They didn't want to give up their lunchtime basketball. So I happened to be coming in on that day. We went out and played, and it was a brutal game. And Jake, I'm 6'6". I was never a great basketball player. I got a lot long reach and lots of elbows, but these guys went out and most of them had PhDs, and they're playing like it's the national championship game every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And what we learned though is after I got there and you went through the process is, when you're playing basketball, one, it's a team game, right? So you get to watch how people interact with people they don't know very well. And it's great what happens. Are they willing to play both ends of the court? So if something goes wrong, will they hustle back on defense? Will they pass the ball? Are they afraid to get the ball, right? So if you pass it to them, are they going to make a decision? Can they handle making decisions in the short term and reacting? And it's very interesting. It doesn't matter what your skill level is. And we were very average. But we had people that sometimes had only ever played once or twice in their life, and they would come out and you could still see how they behaved in that moment. It would tell you a lot about them. And so you didn't want the ball hog, but you also didn't want someone that was afraid of being put in a tough situation, or give it a shot, right? You're not going to know how it goes. And over time, it became this incredible way to read people. And what's interesting is I also tried later on to play golf with people, and I was not nearly as good at reading people on golf. What I found with golf is people have too much time to try to, you can manage yourself around it for a round of golf if you have to. In basketball, you can't manage it, right? It's going to happen to you. So it's a pure reaction. And I think that was kind of the magic of basketball. And I don't know another sport that, in an hour you could learn that much about someone. So yeah, that was a great part of the process. We did it for many years until, frankly, until all of our bodies wore out. A lot of people got injured.
No, I believe it. Probably some waivers had to be signed before you did that.
Actually,
or probably not, actually.
No, back then we didn't have waivers,
not.
But we did have a guy that one of the founders went to the hospital on 3 different occasions.
Goodness.
He blew out his knee. Another time he got hit so hard in his thigh that it swelled up like a watermelon was in it, had compartment syndrome. And then a different time he broke he tore his Achilles in his other leg.
Yeah. Well, hopefully he didn't even try to have a 4th time after that, because that's kind of insane. I would have been done after one of those injuries.
Actually, that guy was probably one of the last ones playing.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. I don't know. You got to love basketball. I don't love it that much to do that. But that's a good point between golf and basketball, because golf, I mean, the obvious thing with golf is, like, if you're golfing with someone and you see them, fluff up their ball, or say they got a 4 instead of a 5, like, that's obvious. But to your point of just being, reacting to a different situation that you can't predict at all on the basketball court.
One of the ideas I learned later on, and this was given to me by someone else, is they said when they would bring someone in for an interview, they would take them out. Ideally, they wanted to go to either a lunch or dinner spot, and they purposely found a place with bad service. And they wanted to see how would someone react in a moment of bad service. And it was really interesting. I went out one time and was in that situation, and you can actually see a ton about someone. And I had another board member said what they want to know is, how does that person treat essentially the admin staff when they're on site. So, lots of things you can look for to see who they really are. Yeah.
No, it's staying on the interview topic, one of the things, and I can't remember if it was in the book or if it was in one of your talks, but you asked the question of how many barbershops are there in New York City. And I love that one, because it's very kind of same. I would say it's kind of similar to the basketball thing, where it's like you can see very quickly what type of people you want on your team and who you don't.
Yeah, it's interesting what that question does is, and I would ask people to try to calculate it in the interview room, right? And say, just tell me how you're going to figure it out. And you're not looking for the answer. I think that's the kind of the trick. You're looking, is someone prepared, or are they willing to try to figure it out with the information they have available real time? And that's a really important concept. And what's interesting is, there were some people that were really bad at it, Jake. And I would tell you, the person that was a star athlete or their valedictorian, they weren't typically good at it, because they had always been had success and they're in control of the situation. And they tended to not want to be in a situation where they might fail. The people that had kind of been through the ringer a few times, like, yeah, I'll try it. What do I got to lose? I've screwed things up before. And it actually led to the concept of what I called my UFO test, which was really these 3 elements. So, can someone deal with uncertainty? Can they deal with failure? And then, what happens when you hold them, you make them take ownership for things they don't control. And if you think about what's happening when you're driving innovation, it's those 3 elements, those are an everyday part of your life.
Yep. No, that makes a lot of sense. I just love that. I just love it, because when I think I heard you say it first before I read the book. So I started thinking in my head how I'd go about that. Now you can just ask ChatGPT, I'm sure, and it'll give you an answer. So it's probably a lot easier now to give you an idea, but it's still the process of how you came up with the answer, right?
Well, that's actually really interesting. Is I don't know. I haven't asked ChatGPT, but I need to. I
Yeah,
know you can Google it and you don't get a very good answer. But
yeah,
ChatGPT would be really interesting. In fact, you bring that up, the whole idea of ChatGPT and AI. And I was talking with someone the other day, and they were working with a client, and they're really struggling how to embrace AI to be more innovative. And and I said, well, AI actually doesn't make you more innovative at all.
Mhm.
AI is actually using huge amounts of data and information that already exists,
Yep.
and it's pulling it out of there. So AI is an incredibly powerful tool, but it's not going to give you brand new ideas. It's generally going to collect ideas or put things together that have existed in the past. And so, it's as much as AI is a huge part of our lives and will become a bigger part of them, it's not necessarily the tool that's going to lead you to something really new and disruptive.
Yeah, especially from a creative or thinking differently, right? Because it's pulling from things that have already happened. So if you're trying to be innovative and do something new, how's it going to come up with it if that doesn't exist?
Well,
Yeah.
it's my argument against best practices. I
Yep.
mean, if you're running a business, you should use best practices, right? It will help you manage the business better. There's no
Mhm.
reason to reinvent the wheel. But if
Yep.
you think best practices lead to innovation, they can't, right? They lead to
Yep.
something that by definition's already been done.
Yeah. No, and in reading the book, this is the book right here. You got about probably 100 copies at your house, I'm sure. We'll put a link to it too, because I saw it's still on Amazon.
It is.
Is it? Yeah. So we'll put the link to that in all of the show notes. But in there, and this is simplified. Innovation is a mindset. I think that's everyone thinks innovation and invention go hand in hand, and you talk about that. Um, but just one of the things that and again, I can't remember if you said it, but I think it was, you said something to the fact of like when you were at Cree and you're going through all of this, you're being innovative. You guys never called it innovation. Like you never said, "Hey, on Friday we're going to have an innovation meeting." It's just you guys had that mindset, and then after the fact, you kind of realized it.
Yeah, so in fact, in doing consulting since I left, I actually would tell you that if you go to an organization and they're using the word innovation a lot, they say it a
Mm.
lot, they're almost certainly not very innovative. It's because it's a mindset, it's a set of habits that you can't talk about, right? It's innovation is the kind of what happens as a result of this mindset, right? It's I get a kick out of companies. I was working with a group, some young leaders recently, and I asked them how many's been told by your boss they want you to spend 30% of your time doing innovation and the other 70% and everything else. And they're like, almost everyone said, yeah. I said, it'll never work, because when you sit down with your boss, what do they ask you about? Well, did you get the 7 things you're supposed to get done that week, right? And that's the concept. It's, look, innovation isn't magic. It's not the answer to all problems, but if you want to do it, you really have to step back and think about, okay, do I have the people that think the right way as the leader? And this is probably the biggest mistake I see most organizations. Most organizations that say they want to do innovation, the leader is actually not committed to it in any serious way. And if they're not, it just doesn't work, because when you say innovation, you're assuming you're going to take some risks. And frankly, if you're going to learn a lot, you're going to fail, because failure is learning. In fact, one of the things I learned on my podcast, Jake, was that the best innovators I met did not use the word failure the same way the rest of us. To them, the word failure and learning are the same word. And you
Yep.
go, wow, okay, that's really cool. But how many leaders, who are listening to your podcast or that you've worked with in the past, truly embrace this idea, you know, I'm okay if it doesn't go well as long as you learned a lot. It sounds good, but in my case, I was running a public company. When it came to the end of the quarter, the shareholders weren't real interested in how much we learned. They wanted to know if we hit our earnings number.
Right. Yeah, and if you make that same mistake twice, then you have some real issues. So innovation is a mindset that there's a better way. That goes in my head often. Eh, Two questions. I guess the first one is how do you don't want to change things every single day, right? So how do you slow down? I mean, I would say you have to be able to compartmentalize, and you got 20 things on your mind. How do you stay innovative? How do you stay organized so it's not every single day you're trying to change things? Um,
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny. You're poking at some things that I'm actually starting to work on. So, for those who who now know about my book based on this podcast, I've actually started the process of probably going to write a second one. And the question is, how do you do this stuff in a real company, right? Like
Yep.
these are great ideas. And the book gives you a lot of ideas about you as a leader and your mindset. But then the question is, okay, how would I implement that in a regular organization? And the challenge you're going to have is the moment you say, I want to compartmentalize it, you're going to basically get stuck. What I would say is that at Cree, the way we did it and what I've seen work in other companies is they basically put together teams that are all in 100% focused on innovation. They're
Yep.
all in. And they basically are going to live or die by the fact that they get there or not. And if they don't get there, those teams might not exist long term. That mentality works really, really well. And essentially, if you think about it, that's what startups do. Startups, like, they're going out of business unless they figure something out. So they'll try anything.
Yep.
What happens in an organization that becomes successful, and success usually means you make some money, you have some profits, you have investors, you got to reinvest those, is that there is a huge risk to like making those mistakes and now you don't deliver the profits or you don't deliver the sales numbers you signed up for. And what I would say is it's very hard to be both people. Now, what you can do as a leader, you could create a team. Maybe in a small company, it's 3 or 4 people. I want them full time on doing something very innovative, and I want them all in. That's all they do, and that's how I'm going to measure them. And then you as a leader could say, okay, I'm going to spend part of my time seeing how they're doing, and then I'm going to go off and run the rest of the company. You could do that as a leader and be in both places, but you can't ask them because what invariably happens is this. Most well-run organizations have metrics. And the moment you have these metrics that are today's problem, we got to do X, Y, and Z this month, this week, this year. And then and I want you to try to do this really big thing. The ones that are easier to measure, the ones that are tangible, human nature puts those on top. I did it. Everyone I've ever met does it. And so what I would suggest is, if you're trying to do something innovative, you almost have to separate that as a dedicated, we're all in and see what it is. And the other thing I would tell you is you better put the right people in charge.
Yep.
The term I've been using lately is the people you want on your innovation team are the same people that would want to be on a pirate ship, but they're probably not your best managers.
Yep.
Like they're the people that are kind of a pain to deal with, right? They're that employee that like, you don't fire them because they're actually really good at their job, but they're always asking a bunch of hard questions and being difficult. Those are really good people for innovation teams.
Yeah. No, that kind of, and I'm glad you talked about, you're going to be coming out with the book with tangible ways that you can implement innovate or implement all of this. Because I had more questions on that, but I guess, going off your last point there, you're within a company, someone reads your book, they know innovation is very important. They've shifted their mindset to believe that, but they're not getting it from their manager or the owner of their company, because that happens a lot. And that's why people, I think I know what you're going to say, but I guess what do you say to those people who are coming up with these ideas and they're trying to be innovative, but they're kind of stuck, out of their control, kind of?
Yeah, so you're getting at this, and this is really the question that's been coming up over and over for the last 3 or 4 years, Jake. Everyone's trying to go, how do I do this? And what I would say is you have a couple of options. One of them is you can decide to be on your own pirate ship or with a small group of people, and you can just be disruptive and do what you think is right. And in some organizations, a lot of times I meet these companies and they really never fire anyone. So everyone's worried about following the rules, yet no one ever really gets fired unless like you commit a felony. So like my point is, well, then why don't you just do what's right anyways? See what happens. Like you actually don't know what the downside is. Now I say that's pretty countercultural. And so I would say that's probably a small number of people are that willing to try it. But that would be my first idea. The second one is I would challenge your management and just say, hey, if you really want us to do this, let's agree on how you're going to measure our success. And if that success isn't measured by rate of learning, by are we getting to these big goals, and instead of these other metrics, it's going to be really tough. But why not propose them, right? Why not just go out there and say, it's amazing sometimes we wait for our managers to give us this great green light, when, as someone who managed lots of people over the years, someone with a really good idea, sometimes it's really nice just to have them put it out there. Now, some people are going to say no. And in the end, if you keep running into, these roadblocks, you have a choice at some point, which is, if you believe innovation is what you want to do and what you want to spend your time doing, then if you try these other ideas and the organization simply rejects them or doesn't want to do them, you have to decide if you want to be a part of that team or not. And, it leads to another idea, which is, if the leader of the organization isn't truly committed to innovation and is setting a tone and is ultimately taking the risk on behalf of the organization, they're prepared to get in trouble for taking these risks, it's going to be really difficult. It doesn't mean you can't make progress, but it's difficult. The flip side of that is, if you're in a big bureaucratic organization, most of those organizations don't know what to do with really innovative people, and they might let you get away with way more than you think. Yeah. And I'll give you one quick example. So when I was a young employee, early in my career, we got so frustrated at Hewlett-Packard. They had this HP way. They had all these great values, that we decided that it was messed up. And so we filed articles of mutiny with our boss's boss's boss, and said we were all going to quit en masse if they didn't recognize that what they were proposing was counterproductive. So what they were saying they wanted us to do and how they were managing us, they were in conflict. And so literally 8 of us filed articles of mutiny, which I don't think anyone's ever really seen before at Hewlett-Packard, and they certainly didn't know what to do with us. But in the end, it led to a lot of great conversations, and we actually were able to make some progress, and they didn't fire us. In fact, the only person that ended up getting replaced was, within 6 months, the head of our division actually got moved to a different part of the company.
Yeah, which is probably a good thing for you. But no, the one kind of question I'm thinking of as you're explaining that, you have this person that is, again, like we talked about, has these ideas. They bring it to, their manager. They do what you had just said. I mean, if you're in a position where you're trying to leave, right? That's the case. The leader is not innovative. They're not committed to changing. What are some signs or questions that person can ask another company to make sure that when they get into that other company, that they know they're not about to be told one thing and then do another? It's just, and then maybe that's something that will be in your next book, of like a tangible questions you can ask. Cause I know you're good at asking questions, and I'm trying to ask a bunch now, so you don't flip it on me. But that's one that I was just curious as you were saying that out loud.
Yeah. That's it. Jake, that's probably the first time anyone's ever asked that specific question, is so how would you know in your new company? Boy, that's now you've got me thinking off the cuff. I think what I would do is I would go in and spend some time, and I would ask them to give me examples of projects that didn't work. So I would essentially ask them for, go ahead and tell me. You got to ask someone what their big successes they want to promote, but that's actually not going to teach you anything. What you want to know is, give me an example or two of some projects you guys have gone after, some things you thought were going to be really innovative that you tried and didn't work. Walk me through how that went. How was the process? What was the outcome? And in the end, what did you do with what you learned? And you're going to get some different responses. Some companies will be like, oh, I can't think of any time we failed. If
Don't work for them.
Yeah, that is not what you're looking for. If you have some people said, oh, wow, you should see how we screwed this one thing up. We were going down this road and this, and they say, okay, it's a good start, but don't stop there, right? It's not, are you comfortable screwing up? What did you learn? And then what did you do as a result of that? And so organizations, essentially what you're looking for is, do organizations have a learning mentality? I tried it. It didn't work. We learned something and we moved on. And then also ask them to describe, how did that happen within the team dynamic? Because if it sounds like it was one person figuring this all out, it doesn't work. What you were looking for is, were there team discussions where it got thrown on the table and people started poking at it? Hey, it didn't work. Like, yeah, we screwed that up, but then we tried this. You're looking for we's. So The other key to this is, innovation typically happens the best happens in teams. You're going to have some brilliant people with different skill sets, but generally speaking, there's a team dynamic and you're really listening for wheeze. This person tried that. And then the person telling the story, are they admitting to anything that they screwed up? So are they taking some ownership? And if you start to, it's interesting. I lived it so long, I know what it sounds like, but I'll have to think about it in maybe more detail, but that maybe gives you some ideas of kind of what's out there. The other thing, Jake, along those lines, you made a comment that, I proposed it to my boss and they're not listening to me. I would just, before you take that step to say, I think I'm going to leave, I think it's really important for each person to challenge themselves. How hard did you make your idea relevant to the person you're sharing it with? So often I hear this, I have this great idea and they won't listen to me. And I said, well, explain it to me. And they explain it to me and it's from their perspective. Great innovation. Part of the trick is, how do I make it relevant to you? So as your boss, how would it make your boss's life better? And so people are like, what do you mean? How do I make my boss's life better? Well, let's face it. Most people go to work. They're trying to earn a paycheck. They generally would like to make sure they don't get fired because, they may have kids and mortgage or things to take care of. They don't like looking stupid, right? So they'd like to make them look good. At the same time, they probably, hopefully want to do what's right for the customer or the business. So how do you get them to relate to it in some way that's important to them? And I find that so often these great ideas are simply stuck because I come to you and I say, Jake, I got this great idea. Like, I don't like it. And I stop there instead of saying, how could I make it relevant to what's important to you? Yeah. And I think that applies broadly, but I think on a one-on-one basis, I would hope people would start there.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that point of, I think a lot of people, they have this idea, they think that they're clear. Their boss or their manager doesn't understand them the way that, whatever their intent is. And then all of a sudden they go home and they complain to their husband or their wife, or they call their mom and, my boss doesn't listen to me. One of the books that we all read here, everyone reads it to start, is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. And that's one of them. It's like, the same way you think of innovation as a mindset, if you can think of ownership of a mindset and like, well, what could I have done differently? Because for the most of the time, if you have a great idea and your boss is ignoring you or doesn't want to do it, that doesn't make a lot of sense. If your idea is so great, why would they say no? So it's just having that mindset of like, well, maybe I didn't communicate it clearly. And starting there first, probably.
Yeah, and I think that I think you're onto a great point. I think the ownership mentality and innovation are related. Yep. I think they're intertwined. There's a reason startups and stock options work, because effectively what you're saying to everyone is, I'm going to pay you less than you could make somewhere else. But we're all going to sign up together that if we do something really great, that's the only way we can win. Otherwise, we actually could have gone somewhere else and made more money. And in that ownership mentality, in fact, one of our core values was that everything we do and every decision has to be in the best interest of our shareholders. And every employee was allowed to challenge everyone else, including up, what that decision was. And I just, people took it literally. I had employees at a quarterly meeting, 500 people in an auditorium, and people go, I don't get why you think that decision is in the best interest of our shareholders. It was like, wow, I guess I better hold myself accountable to that as well. And it's a really healthy thing to do.
Yeah. You're grateful that they actually held you accountable, but at the same time, you're like, oh shit, like in your brain. And then you realize like, no, this is part of the process. This is me living out that core value.
And you know what? Well. And occasionally, Jake, what you're going to find is that, hey, that decision was kind of something I wanted to do. I don't got a good answer for that one. And I revisited a couple of them. And it's, look, as managers and leaders, having someone hold us accountable, we got there because we did things well. And it's really easy to start to believe that all of a sudden we got all the answers. The answers, you never have all the answers, right? Yep. And so that environment is super healthy. But yeah, it's pretty cool to have, an operator on the plant floor challenge you in front of everyone else. But I'll tell you what, if you make decisions for the right reason, it works great. And then flip it around.
Yep.
when you have to make a really tough decision and you can make it, explain it in a way that is on the same value system as everyone else, it was actually easier to do hard things at Cree as
Yep.
long as they were aligned with how this is in the best interest of what we all signed up for.
Yep. Yep. It's a very clear um, line of like, this is, what everyone's intent is, if that's the case, if you're following that core value.
And, and by the way, you could apply it, just to take your ownership idea to the next level with
Yep.
innovation. If you're going to build that innovation team, you need to incentivize them differently. You
Yep.
have to incentivize them. The answer is there's no bonus if they don't get to the goal. They
Mm-hmm.
need a risk reward profile that makes it better to try to get there than settle for where they're at.
Yep.
And have a risk of getting nothing at the end. And however you do that, in a private company, it could be a bonus structure. In public companies, we can use stock options, but that whole idea that there's something to be gained, but there's something to be lost at the same time, that tension, it drives really incredible creativity.
Yep. No, it's the whole, but you mentioned it earlier, but not having a plan B, plan B, there's a difference between having, you're working through something and one specific thing doesn't work. Maybe you try another one, but like succeeding is the only option, like you're going to get through this and there's no backup plan. And that's what it is funny when people ask me like what my backup plan was when we started 2-3, and it's just like a lot of people were surprised, like there is no backup plan. I don't have anything to fall back on. My wife doesn't work. She homeschools our kids. Like there is no, like there's no backup plan. So no, I like that.
But I don't think what people fully appreciate is if you had a backup plan, it's unlikely it would have ended up where it did.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are moments typically in starting any venture that you're like, I'm not sure we're going to get there from here.
Yep.
Well, if the alternative is I'm shutting this thing down and I'm losing money on the deal, you're going to keep going. You're going to die trying, right?
Right.
If you have a backup plan, like screw it, I'll just go back to my old job and we can do that and they'll pay me a nice salary. And yeah. You could do that. But that's why, whether it be starting a business or driving innovation, that you have no choice. You have to believe your only option is to find a way to success. And
Yep.
it also does a nice thing. It also helps you realize that you have a goal, but the goal can evolve as you move forward. It's survival. And so sometimes my guess is the business, let me ask you, does the business look a little different today than you thought when you started it?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Because
Did you make different trade-offs then as you learn things along the way?
Oh, for sure. I mean, you've learned, I think, not to toot my own horn, I've always been good at saying no. Like but now realizing you have to do it to the max. Where it's like, dang, I really like being around these people, but they're not my immediate family and they're not with my companies. And that's what I have to focus on right now. So, I mean, trade-offs in that way. But when starting it, my mindset was completely different than it is now. Because when I started, it was like, I'm leaving so I can get the whole pie, right? I'm doing all the work. I need to get all the money for it. And then all of a sudden, you hire your first employee and they have a family. And then it's like, okay, this is like, it clicked for me. And trust me, I'm still trying to figure this out every single day. But hiring Jen and bringing her in that's when it all changed for me. And now we're up to today, or as of yesterday, we have 20. So yeah, my mindset's completely different from 3.5 years ago to today. Yeah.
I think one of the important things when whether it's innovation or starting a business is you have an idea, you have a kernel of what you're going to do that adds value. But I always tell people, don't overthink it, because as you get into the market, as you test some of these things out, you get more information. And what you want to do is realize, oh, actually what people really value is this. And this thing I thought they'd like a lot, it's okay, but they really want more. And so what happens is you can adapt to where the true problem is getting solved and where the value is. And it's the same way when when we're trying to develop a product that solves a customer problem, you want to solve the problem. How exactly you get there, we're kind of flexible at the end of the day.
Yeah. No, and two, just, you go back to just being okay doing different things and experimenting, with whether it's whether it's playing basketball as an interview process, or, for me, it was like, can I, I do a few things specifically, we all read the same 3 books, and I'm like, is that okay? Can you do that? Can you tell someone, hey, you have to read a book? And I'm like, you can read during company time. Like, there's just a lot of things like that where it's like, just, it doesn't seem like a risk. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? But it's just being willing to kind of do those things as well.
So it's interesting, as you're building your company, you're at 20 employees now, and my guess is, you've been involved in hiring probably all of them,
Mm-hmm.
and so you're essentially hiring for culture and values as you do that. As you start to get a little bigger, what got very interesting for us is, okay, how do you hire 500 people in a year and try to get them all aligned to your values? And it got really hard. And we made some success on it. But when we grew the fastest is when we struggled the most, because, our best way of getting someone to buy into values and culture was over time through experiences, right? And when you're bringing a lot of people in at the same time, it just doesn't work that way. So, it's a really tricky balance, whether you have values for what you're trying to do when it comes to innovation, or values when you're building your company. It's really important that not only are you clear what they are, it's more important that your behaviors reflect what they are. And then here's the other thing I think people miss, and this is something you can relate to in basketball. When you're at practice or you're in a game and you screw up, the coach screams at you and tells you what you did wrong, and all your teammates see it and you see it, and your job is to embrace what is constructive there and use it to get better. That's the whole point of it, right? And ideally, the coach is not trying to make you feel like shit. They're just trying to get you to change your behavior, right?
Yeah.
In most companies, someone does something wrong and people say, well, I don't want you to call them out. I want you to wait. And then after the meeting, pull them aside and say, hey, you could have done that better. Well, think about it. If you're on the team, how do you know that those values people are being held accountable? You don't. And so, we had this very transparent culture where we basically, in a meeting, it was basically everything's on the table. And I will tell you that it works much better to driving the types of behaviors and values versus this idea of, hey, we're not going to provide constructive feedback in front of other people. That constructive feedback isn't just for the person, it's for the
Right.
team.
Yep.
And I think that, we probably don't want to swear as much as some basketball coaches or do some other things, but
Yeah.
I think there's something to be learned from sports where having it out in the open, you are actually training everyone at the same time.
Yep. No, it is really funny that you bring that up, because we had to reschedule, from a few weeks back, and I reread your book, and just kind of, and maybe it was, I don't know, you said that before. I heard you say that before, whether it was in your book or not. And we just got out of a meeting right before this about literally just that, where it could have been something where I could have pulled someone to the side. It's just like, no, we're going to be together. It was great. There's 20 minutes, and now everyone knows. Like, it's just, there's no point of, it's all on how you approach it. I mean, you don't have to be, a hard ass on everything. I mean, people still have feelings, but have empathy, I mean, understand the intent is there, but it's just like, no, we have to do things, this way instead of that. And just, what's the worst that can happen? You have a very, genuine conversation. Everyone knows. Move on.
Yeah. And, and if someone's bothered by that, it's telling you something, right? Wow. If you want to move fast in an organization, you have to have the whole organization aligned and able to make decisions independent of you. That only works if you're aligned on the values. And if you're waiting to do it all one-to-one, it just slows things down. You just can't go as fast. You can be done either way, but you're not going to drive the type of change we're talking about.
Yep. No, that was a learning experience for me too, of trying to do it that way. And then you understand, if I'm telling others to call me out in front of the group, and I'm okay with it, that everyone else has to be okay with that, as well. And it's just from your example, it all depends on how you do it. If you're up on the stage and your operations guy says something and you're literally above him, but then you act like you're above him and you say, no, I'm the CEO, do what I say. Like, how do you think that's going to go?
Yeah, that's an important concept. The idea that do what I say, I'm the boss, did not exist in our culture at all. It
Mm-hmm.
was, in fact, I used to tell people when we were doing orientation, if you ever hear somebody say, you have to do that because Chuck said so, it's bullshit,
Yep.
because that will never be a reason to do something. Now, I may
Yep.
ask you to do something, and you're more than welcome to ask me why I think that's the right thing to do and give you the logic. No problem. But it's not because I said so, because there are no such thing as pet projects. There should be
Yeah.
all aligned. And by the way, the key to this is you don't always all make the same decision. What you want is people making decisions based on the same value set. Because look, we want people to use their judgment, right? But as
Yep.
long as they're doing it for the right reasons, then what the answer is could be different. But and that's why you got to get past this idea of everything's about what someone should do. I want to know why we made a decision. Why do
Yep.
we do it? And if we're aligned there, we're generally going to get pretty far down the path. And the other nice thing is that organizations where everyone understands the goal and is aligned and is able to make decisions, that's how we went from a small company to a big company, because they may have had 1,000 more employees than us, or in some cases 10,000 more. They spent all their time in meetings trying to argue who was going to do what, and we
Yep.
just told people to go get it done.
Yep. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Now I'm sidetracked because I'm just thinking about that. Um, no, one of the things I wanted you to touch on is features versus benefits. That one kind of hit with me because I get caught up in that sometimes. Where this example that I'll give you is we have this drawing software we use, and at the end of the day, it's about the benefits to the customer. Yes, we can simplify things on our end, but we want these warehouse layout drawings and or 3D renderings to just look extremely professional, detailed. And then there's some features in this software where it's like you can use AI to have a pretty background over here and over here, and it's just like you don't need to be chasing that. Focus on the benefits. So, I mean, like rereading the book and just listening to you talk has already helped our company, whether you understand that or not. So thank you for that. But talking through the difference between feature and benefits.
Yeah, this is, and as an engineer, I would say engineers may be the single worst feature people there are, because we love the technology, right? Look at what it can do, or look at, and the answer is the only thing that matters in business is what is the benefit that the other person is getting out of this. And so the fact that an LED light bulb uses less energy, that's actually a feature. And you would say, well, someone might find that to be a benefit. Yeah, you could. But what people really care about was not that LED light bulbs saved energy, is that they saved them money,
Mhm.
right? And it took us 2 or 3 years. I mean, Jake, we chased that one for a long time. And it was actually a board member finally said, guys, this is simple. People don't walk into a store and buy things because it's good for them. They buy things because they think it's a good deal. It's good for their pocketbook. It's good for their wallet. It's better financially. And you start going, wow. And if you think about it, most decisions are being made as somehow how it's going to make someone's more money, their life nicer, better, make better decisions, make them look better to their boss, whatever that is. But that's the stuff. And I think if we just, it's just really helpful sometimes to step back and go, the end of the day, your customer wants to know, is this solution going to somehow make their company better? And their better might be, more efficient. I can use less labor, right? I have less scrap. I can less obsolescence, whatever the thing is that they're measuring. That's the only thing about your software that they really care about.
Yeah.
And otherwise it's just pretty software. And I think that, God, it's so easy to fall into that trap unless you ask yourself, and I'll be honest, ask your customer, what do you care about? And most customers will get you there pretty fast. Maybe
Yep.
sometimes don't do what I do, which is talk too much. Stop and listen. And in
Yeah.
fact, don't ask them what they want. Have them. This is a really interesting thing I learned along the way. It's most important, if you want to help your customer, to not ask them what they need, but instead have them describe how they do what they do. And what you're listening for is the problems they're having, right? The things they can't solve. In your case, it would be even better is to go, my guess is you do this, go watch them do their work and see where are the gaps. The problem that most customers aren't very good at describing how you're going to do it. They can describe the problem, and then your job is to translate how your widget or your solution or your service makes that problem go away. But I think so often we get focused, and this is kind of a tangential to features and benefits, we get focused on what we're going to do and not the problem it's going to solve. And that's actually the only reason someone does something.
Yeah. No, we have 3 new people in a sales position now, and that's, what where our value is not gonna be is if you say, hey, I have a new warehouse, I have the layout. Not even that. It could be you have the layout. This is exactly what I want. All I want is just the price for this rack specifically. Like, yes, we can do it. Yes, we will quote it. We will work with you on it. But where we have the most value is where we understand where your pain points are. We go, which is what I'm doing right after this, is I'm going over to a company in New Berlin, going to walk through their operations, see what their pain points are, and then come back, and then we'll put together some concepts. But it's just asking the question, using the buzzword of pain points. It's overused, but it is true. Like if someone just sends us an email like, hey, I need 10 upright frames, I need 20 beams and 20 wire decks. Yes, we'll quote it, but that's not who we are. Like that's not where no one's going to have any idea how we're different if that's all we're doing each day.
Well, what might be interesting in that case is when someone calls and says that, says absolutely can quote that. But the comeback would be but would you like to see how we might be able to help you set it up and use less than that? Like we might be able to show you how to do it with less stuff or differently. And I think that's, I think that's always the case, right? The customer has decided they know what the solution is, but you guys have seen more warehouses than most of your customers have ever seen, right? And so how would you go about it? I mean, what would be interesting is, if you think about someone today, what do you think is someone today running a warehouse in the scale that you focus on? What do you think the biggest unsolved problem they have is?
The biggest unsolved problem? I mean, the biggest unsolved problem is going to be labor. I mean, that's so it's how do you use automation? How do you become more dense, use more automation so that the people you do have can be more efficient? And I think getting over the hurdle of exploring automation is a lot easier now than it was pre-COVID. So having that, having those objections and being able to meet those. I mean, I think it's about how you phrase the question too. If someone comes to me and says, hey, I know exactly this is what we're doing, blah, blah, blah. And if you say, if you just phrase it like, well, are you opposed to exploring automation? I don't want to guarantee anything. I don't even know if it's a fit, but like, have you guys gone down that path? And then it just opens up a whole nother conversation. And that's how I do believe we differentiate ourselves from our competition. Long-winded answer to your question, but I think that would be it.
Yeah. So today, the business model, it's less about the space and more about the labor is probably the bigger constraint.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. Yeah, that's probably both. I mean, it's a mix of both. I mean, there hasn't been. That's not true. No, there might be one company that does not have a problem with labor. Whether it's finding good labor or you have such a good culture that you're trying to add more people. So it's just never going to be perfect. And that clicked into my head because we toured this place, Banker Wire, down in Mugwanago. It's just one of the coolest facilities I've ever been in. And you can tell immediately when you walk in there that the culture is amazing. The leadership team they got it figured out. But even with them, it's like, okay, we got this figured out. Now we need more people. And now we need to find more people like the people we have. So it's just, I don't think it'll ever be perfect.
Yeah, you're touching on something that probably was the single biggest limitation to our growth over my 25 years at Cree. And it was never, it's a capital, but it's human capital. It's not financial capital. Human capital that is aligned with what you're trying to do and the way you're trying to do it will almost always be a great business's constraint. And so figuring out how to optimize that is at the end is almost always a recipe for success, or companies that know how to train it. I mean, I'll give you a really interesting, analogy that came up recently. People were asking, so how do you develop culture, and how do you get aligned for it? Well, you have to hire people that are wired a certain way, but then when they get there, you have to put them in situations and they have to see it. They have to learn it, and then they have to choose to stay. So it's kind of like that basketball interview. They have to go through it, get yelled at a couple times, and choose to keep coming back. Okay, they've bought in, right? They've accepted that there's something to be gained from this. And I think, we look at that and we say, wow, is that really the only way? And someone the other day said, well, they gave me a great analogy, which is the Jesuits. So if you think about the Jesuits been around over 500 years, probably one of the longest standing corporations over that time. They make someone go through, I think it's 14 to 16 years of situations, very intentional things they go through. So that journey is incredibly intentional. And what they're doing is they're having someone decide, they're training them on their culture and their values, and they're making them decide, do you really want to be a part of it? And you go, okay, that's a pretty extreme example. But if you think about it, why would someone choose to enter a life of giving, a Jesuit priest has a pretty, they're giving up a lot in their life, right, to choose that journey. But what they're doing is they use this process that they have that's essentially choosing. And the reason I bring that up is people look at that and go, wow, that's kind of extreme. That's what you want to do in your company. You probably don't have 16 years. Maybe you have 6 months or 12 months. But what I would tell you is I think it's very hard to really get someone fully aligned on a culture in less than about 18 months.
Yeah. You have to go through things. You have to, and honestly, the things that happen, I don't want to say bad things, but it's good when it's not perfect. We've talked about this in a few of our podcasts. Those are the best customers, clients, relationships we have are the ones when you get through, all the bad things, the problems. And it's the same internally too.
There's an old saying, I think it's an old IBM sales slang, saying that it's good to have problems from time to time, then we can show them how good we are at customer service. Yeah. And I know no one really chooses to do that, but you really can't show someone your differentiation until those moments happen.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think how I wanted to end this is basically tell the story of how we met and how I'm just happy you're still willing to talk to me. So I get introduced to Chuck because at the time I'm thinking about leaving the company I was at to go start, a co-working space. And I'm excited because I get to talk to you about it and pitch you about it. I spent a lot of time on this pitch deck. And instead of me focusing on, who am I meeting with, right? Have some, put myself in your shoes. I come to the table with this presentation with the light bulb on it, not understanding the impact that you had in the whole LED world.
A traditional light bulb, by the way.
A traditional light bulb. Yeah. It was an incandescent light bulb, or you tell me what it's called. You would give it, but it was not. It was not an LED light bulb. And before I think I even said anything, you pointed that out, and I was a little rattled the rest of the time. And it was at a brewery, so I think I had a few beers pretty quick to ease my nerves. So I just want to say thank you for calling me out, because it just made me more aware, just with who I'm meeting with, and just have more awareness of the situation. So thank you for that.
Well, what's interesting, Jake, is that, there are people who, some people say, wow, you just met him. Why would you just throw it out there? And one, because I'm not very good at being someone who I'm not, right? And so someone asked me for my opinion on how this new idea might work. And so I just threw it out there. And your reaction was, and where you ended up, what your reaction that day was a great indicator that you were going to be able to go on this journey you're on, which is, okay, yeah, you took it on the chin a little bit. I hassled you. I basically, pointed out a few things, and I challenged some ideas in the proposal. But you rolled with it. You tried to learn from it. And you know what? That's, as long as someone's willing to do that, there's a lot of opportunity. Now, what you didn't mention is that when that meeting was over, then we discussed the basketball coaching situation. And that's when it got really crazy.
That wasn't me. Yeah, I was listening. I was
Yeah,
listening.
that was pretty interesting. So then all of a sudden I was on the defensive, and I
Yeah,
don't know that I had very good answers that day either. But you know what? We both ended up in a really good spot. We have a top 10 basketball team and a world class coach, and you got a successful business.
yeah. No, I again, thanks for coming on. I've wanted to have an excuse to talk to you for a long time, and I'm happy you said yes. So I'm sure I'll see you this summer at some point.
I look forward to maybe getting in a round of golf, but it's great to talk with you, and best of luck in your business. And if I can be helpful, just always let me know.
Thanks, Chuck.